I know I said in the prior episode that I'm not panicking when it comes to the Devils, but their last few outings, even I have to admit, I'm a little concerned. We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast. Here at the Locked On Network, I'm your host, College Hockey Play announcer, Devils Wire of Pucks Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. Happy belated MLK Day. I hope you guys enjoyed your off day. This New Jersey Devils team, they've been off for quite some time. And I know I said in the prior episode that I'm not really hitting the panic button. Even I will admit, I'm starting to grow a little concerned because these last few trended games for Devils, anything but good. In the first segment, I will discuss the present state of the Devils, like what are we dealing with for a time being. Then in the second segment, we will hear from head coach Sheldon Keefe. He spoke to the media after the Devils lost again, this time to the Ottawa Senators. Then in the third and final segment, I will discuss the future of this Devils team because at the time of this recording, they're still second in the Metropolitan Division. Keep in mind, the Carolina Hurricanes will play later tonight as I am recording this episode. They are scheduled to play the Chicago Blackhawks. More likely than not, that's going to change come Tuesday morning when this episode goes live. But people are starting to have their doubts as to whether or not this Devils team can go far, or worst case scenario, will they miss the playoffs? But I'll talk about that momentarily. All right. Since December 28th, the Devils have been struggling. Their record, the last 11 games, is 2-6-3. Now, to their credit, in that 11-game span, they have picked up 7 points. They won in OT to the Lightning. They won in regulation to the Kraken, but they lost in OT to the Maple Leafs, the Panthers, the Rangers. So that's why the Devils still remain second in the Metro, because despite racking up more losses, they're still walking away with something in most of these outings, which is something positive. I talked about that in the latest episode. That's the main difference from this year's Devils team to last year's Devils team, because last year's Devils team was wildly inconsistent, but they were losing too much in regulation. And I said it then, and I'll say it now. If the Devils are going to lose, I really hope it's in overtime so they at least walk away with something, because I would rather them walk away with at least 1 point compared to no point. But their latest games against the Philadelphia Flyers and Ottawa Senators, like I said, I'm not hitting the panic button, but I'm growing a little concerned because this can't keep happening. They lost to the Flyers 3-1 on Saturday. Then on Sunday, they lost to the Senators 2-1. And when we look at the Flyers and Senators, with all due respect, those are two teams you should not be losing to. And Travis Green, he was better prepared for the Devils as the game progressed. I'll talk about that a little later. But it's not just the Flyers and Senators. During this 11-game span, let's look at a couple other teams that the Devils really should not be losing to. The Ducks and Sharks. Remember that California road trip? That was tough. It's unacceptable to lose to teams like that, especially if you have playoff aspirations. Now, here's the thing. If the Devils were to go 3 for 4 out of those matchups, then I wouldn't really be batting an eye because you're bound to lose a stinker. But going 0 for 4 in this sort of span, that can't happen. Same mistake as last year, falling too much into those quote unquote trap games. when you look on the schedule, you're saying like, oh, the Devils are surely going to win this game, but they end up losing in regulation. And I'm also a little concerned about their overall effort because if we look the past 11 games and see the games in which they did end up winning, they weren't exactly in dominating fashion. So the game against the Kraken, for example, the Devils were just very lucky that Jacob Markstrom made some godly saves. That win was completely on Markstrom because, in all honesty, the Kraken should have won that game. But luckily, Markstrom strong in between the pipes. And then the game against the Lightning, it went into overtime. And Stefan Nason, great net front presence, but the Devils have been struggling in overtime throughout the course of this season. And sometimes a blind squirrel finds a nut. I think the problem with the Devils currently is that their offense is a little stagnant. Now, we talked about how the Devils' bottom six hasn't really been producing. Well, in the prior game against the Senators, Tomas Tatar scored the only goal for New Jersey, and that was his first goal since late November. So I can't really put the blame on the bottom six. My thing is like the offense just in general has been stagnant. Like the top six isn't really producing that much. The bottom six isn't producing that much. And Sheldon Keefe was asked about the bottom six productivity because, let's face it, it's been lacking all season long. It's great that somebody like Paul Cotter can rack up a lot of hits. That was the main reason why the Devils brought him on board, to add more physicality, but he can't go an entire month span like he did at one point and not register a point. Erik Haula, I know he's injured and hopefully he comes back stronger, but he is not the same player as he was last year, and hopefully he starts to get it going. Sheldon Keefe said that's a piss poor excuse, and I do agree with them. I acknowledge that the bottom six needs a bit of a boost. The Devils need to find somebody in the market to try to bolster it, but that can't just be the only excuse, because a good example would be Jack Hughes. He needs to stop turning the puck over so many times. He's a great player, and I love what he brings from a points perspective, but it doesn't excuse the fact that he's got to handle the puck a little bit more. Maybe turn down the flashiness a little bit, because we've seen it in a few of these overtime outings. He costed the Devils in one particular matchup against the Rangers, which is why Sam Carrick was able to get the game-winning goal. Jack Hughes has to tone it down just a little bit more. And then for goaltending, I'm not going to complain about the goaltending, honestly, because it's been great all season long. And I even put out a question on social media saying, what are you the most concerned with when it comes to the Devils? And somebody responded and said, I'm concerned with everything except the goaltending. And I humorously responded and said, well, that's a first in many years, because the last few seasons, the main issue from the Devils discourse is that the Devils don't have strong goaltending. But Jake Allen, he was great against the Flyers. Jacob Markstrom, he was great against the Senators. Those losses are not on their shoulders. So these past 11 games for Devils just hasn't been good. Goaltending, excellent. Defense, I know people have their complaints, but it's not like the Devils are sacrificing 6 goals. Their defense is still solid, in my opinion. My thing is, like, you don't know which team is going to catch fire. You don't know which team is going to go on a cold spell. Unfortunately, the Devils are on a cold spell. They're still second in the Metro. They're still geared up for a playoff position. But my concern is that they really need to snap out of their losing ways sooner rather than later. They need to get back to what they were doing prior to the Christmas break, which is they need to get back to dominating their opponents and winning in convincing fashion, so that way they're a force to be reckoned with. All right, we're going to hear from Sheldon Keefe momentarily, and also I will talk about the future of this current Devils team. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and there are a variety of bets keeping every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has got you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. Okay, head coach Sheldon Keefe spoke to the media after the Devils lost to the Senators. Here's what he had to say.
As a coach, when you get the start like you got, you all over them, 17 shots, and your team doesn't come up with one. What do you say to your team? Just keep going, keep believing?
Yeah, I mean, that's the message. You just talk about how that's how we want it to look. That's what it looks like when you break out clean and we're connected and come to the neutral zone together. But also that it's still 0-0, so it's very much a hockey game. We can't get overconfident, and also need to do a little bit more to get one in, in terms of traffic and those sorts of things. So that was the message. But I mean, obviously you don't say this to the team, but you look at it and you have a period like that. It's our most dominant period statistically of the season, and you don't score. It's you're kind of thinking that it's going to set up the game the way that it ended. You let a team hang around on a back-to-back on the road, and especially the way things have been going for us, things start to pile up.
And is that part then how the third period we only get 3 shots, and is that maybe guys ran out of gas, or we're not just trying to be too perfect?
I definitely don't think we're trying to be too perfect. I think we ran out of gas. There's no question on that. But also just, they have a lead now, so now they're really jamming it up. They're not really trying to do much with the puck. They're just defending, and they defend hard, and we didn't do much to get through it. Really the whole second half of the game. That was a real challenge for us. We couldn't get through.
One of the things that Thomas Tarr was saying was really in that second half, it almost felt like so away from the structure that it was a little chaotic. Did you sense that from your team a little bit?
I got to watch it back, from a structure standpoint.
Right.
But I felt Ottawa got way better, in terms of their structure and their game, and it made it a lot harder on us, and we couldn't find our way through.
Just your thoughts on the way Lazar's line really matched up, particularly in those first 2 periods against the Chuck line, and just the way they were able to handle that matchup.
Yeah, they did great. I mean, it wasn't always that matchup necessarily, but just no matter who I put them over the boards against, those guys continue to be good. You got another goal for us here today, 2 games in a row, so they're doing their part.
You've obviously got a lot of confidence in this team. Could you just tell me how this team fights its way out of it?
Our best players have to be better. It's that simple. End of statement.
You've talked about your defensive structure the past couple of weeks. How do you think they played today?
I thought we were great. I mean, again, we don't give up much. Second period we gave up some off of some puck battles or pucks that we turned over inside our zone, and they got some chances on them, but our structure has been fine, which is why we're hanging around in these games, not getting blown out. I mean, defensively we're fine. We got to execute better. I mean, we ran alone 2-3 times in the first period, and some of our best people, we need those got to go in the net. With where we're at, we got to convert, and when you don't, it's going to be a tough game, and it's a tough game here again today, and you sort of leave the game open for them. They get a spin around shot, and in the slot they get a point shot, and it's 2 of their least productive offensive players that they have on their team that end up scoring, and that's just kind of the way the game goes. But you leave it like that when you don't convert on offense.
Okay, so here are my main takeaways from that lengthy soundbite. The first being, in the matchup against the Senators, the Devils let Ottawa hang around. And I was actually watching the game on NHL Network, and Kevin Weeks said something similar, which is the Devils really need to capitalize on their early dominance, because similar to what I said at the end of the first segment, the Devils need to get back to dominating teams, and they got off to a really good start against Ottawa, but I was really concerned when the Devils weren't translating their shots to goals, at least one, because I'm just like, all it will take for Ottawa is to score one goal of their own, and they're going to be back in the driver's seat. As a result, they went up 1-0. To the Devils' credit, Tomas Tatar answered back quickly. Then come the third period, Zub scored the game-winning goal, and the Devils just had no more offensive momentum. And it did seem like that the Devils ran out of gas. And I was also really concerned about that. So when looking at who was in net for Ottawa, it was Anton Forsberg. And prior to the game on Sunday, the last time Forsberg won a game against the Devils, you would have to go back to April 26, 2022. Historically speaking, he hasn't been really all that good against New Jersey, but he absolutely goalied them, and he stymied their offensive attack because, once again, the Devils generated 17 early shots, but nothing to show for it. And Weeksy even said post-game that the Senators should be buying Forsberg some beers after the game. So the Devils got goalied once again, and that seems like to be the story all season long, which is anytime the Devils go up against a goalie that's struggling or mediocre, they just get stymied. So I agree with Keefe, which is the Devils allowed the Senators to hang around a little too much. And another thing that was brought up is structure and chemistry. Now, behind the scenes, I know that this Devils team is a tight-knit group. I remember speaking to Nico Hischier back in November about his relationship with Jack Hughes, and he said that he and Jack are great friends. And I even talked to Catherine Bogart, one of the team reporters for the Devils, about the matter, and she says, like, everyone is close with one another. They always hang out, and there's no drama within the locker room, but that chemistry in the locker room is not translating to the ice. It seems like something is off, like the magic has fizzled out. And I think Sheldon Keefe needs to make a drastic change just to shake things up a little bit, because I hate to use this example because this is probably a sore subject for the Devils discourse, but I remember when Lindy Ruff was the head coach, he wasn't afraid to change up the lines drastically, much to the ire of the Devils fan base. But I'm just trying to give an example, which is something's not working, and you can't just put out the same product and hope for a different result. Try to switch things up and see if that works, because obviously teams are starting to figure out the Devils a little bit more. So something's got to change, especially if you want to keep your playoff position, because don't look now, similar to what I said in the first segment, the Columbus Blue Jackets only trail you by 7 points. And if you continue to spiral out of control, your points cushion is going to get smaller, smaller, and smaller. And the most important thing that Keefe said during that soundbite, the best players have got to step up. To Jack Hughes and Dougie Hamilton's credit, they do contribute with a lot of points. If you were to look at the point shares ratings, Dougie Hamilton is first on the Devils, followed by Jack Hughes, which means a lot of the Devils' points are generated from those two players. But Dougie and Jack also lead the team in giveaways. That has to be fixed, or at least for Jack. Jack is handling the puck way more than Dougie. And if you're trying to facilitate the offense, if you're trying to set up shop in your offensive end, and you're turning the puck over, that doesn't really set a good precedent for you, now does it? And going back to what I said in the first segment, Sheldon Keefe talked about it in this respective soundbite, the defense hasn't really given up that much. In fact, if we look at the Devils' past few games, it's not like the Devils are getting blown out. And in fact, at one point, they had sent 4 straight games into overtime, and I was fearful that we would see the same thing against the Senators. So 2-1 loss against Ottawa, 3-1 loss against the Flyers. One of those goals was an empty netter goal. 4-3 loss to the Leafs in overtime. 2-1 loss to the Panthers in a shootout. 3-2 victory against the Lightning. 3-2 loss to the Rangers in OT. You get the point. The defense and goaltending hasn't really given up that much. It's not like the Devils are sacrificing 6 goals. but you need to be able to win those tight-knit battles. And I'll talk more about that in the third segment, because that is so crucial if you want to be a playoff team, because there's a huge difference between a regular season team and a playoff team. I still believe in Sheldon Keefe. I think he's the correct man for the job. I don't think he deserves that much blame. He's put the blame on his shoulders before, but he's calling out his star players to be a little bit better. And I think that is definitely important. All right. We're going to talk about the overall solution for this Devils team and what the future holds for them. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about Select Quote. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from Select Quote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. Select Quote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets Select Quote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage to up to $5 million. No medical exam required, and it's more affordable than you think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. Go to selectquote.com/lockedonnhl today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. Select Quote, they shop, you save. Okay, let's talk about some solutions for the Devils. The most obvious one, and I've been talking about it time and time again, the top guys need to produce a little bit more. Now, I've been getting a lot of messages on my social media feeds like, should the Devils bench Jack Hughes and Luke Hughes to make an example? And I said, John Tortorella is not behind the bench. So I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And if I'm being honest, the Devils aren't exactly a better team without Jack or Luke. They just need to produce a little bit more and stop turning the puck over. I don't think Luke was all that bad against the Senators, but Jack, it seems like his mistakes are being magnified a little bit more. And my message to Tom Fitzgerald is that the Devils definitely need to look at the open market for a potential option to help give them a bit of a spark offensively on their bottom six, because the bottom six, yes, they produce a lot of physicality, and sometimes you'll get a spark plug play every now and again, like we saw with Tomas Tatar against the Senators, but offense has just been tough to come by for the bottom six. So the Devils definitely need to look at the trade market. They need to look in free agency. I don't really know. You need to search for an answer. And I know a lot of people have their eye on the drama up in Vancouver. Elias Pettersson, JT Miller, the feud, what's going to happen? Are the Canucks actually going to go through and try to trade both players to different teams? I don't really know. But from a contract standpoint, I don't know how the Devils can get the job done. And I've been seeing on my social media feed that the Devils should trade away Dougie Hamilton. I hate to break it to you. Hamilton has a no movement clause. He's not going anywhere, at least for this season. And there are a few other players that have no trade clauses, no movement clauses, modified no trade clauses. So trading away pieces isn't as cut and dry as you think. If I had to make an educated guess as to which players might be available via a trade, now I'm not talking about for like Miller or Pettersson, I'm just talking about in general. I think it's going to be Dawson Mercer and Shimon Nemeth. I think those are the two tradable assets that the Devils have. Nemeth is still in his entry-level contract, and Mercer doesn't have any clauses attached to his contract. So my thing for Fitzy is like, you got to search for something to bolster the bottom six. And the big thing, and hopefully this isn't a controversial take, but this Devils team is a playoff team. But are they a championship caliber team? I'm going to have to say no. They haven't convinced me that they can win a Stanley Cup this season. Next season, that's a question mark. I don't really know. But here's an interesting fact, courtesy of Gabriel Trevino of NJ.com. He put up a quote from Sheldon Keefe after the Devils lost to the Flyers. We have a good enough defensive foundation that when we adhere to that, we're in a position to win every game. We can complain about the offense, but still find a way to win 1-0. That's certainly in our grasp. The Devils are now 0-13-3 when they don't score at least 3 goals. And that's a problem for me because when it comes to playoff hockey, it's that dumb, repeated ad nauseum cliche. The playoffs are a different animal compared to the regular season. But the truth of the matter is, there's no lie. It's completely different than the regular season because whoever you face in the playoffs, you're going to have to beat them 4 times out of 7. So your opponent is going to game plan and strategize against you the best way they can. A good example is that the Devils and Rangers a couple years ago, the Rangers got up to a 2-0 lead, so the Devils had to make changes in order to beat the Rangers. So they took out Vitek Vanecek, inserted Akira Schmid, and then you saw some role players elevate their game, like Eric Haula, Andre Palat, just to name a few. Because Jack Hughes, it took him a while to get going in that series. Jesper Bratt was a no-show. Nico Hischier, he wasn't really as good as he was in the regular season. The Devils found other ways from other players that elevated their game, and then they beat the Rangers in 7. And then come the second round against the Hurricanes, the Devils basically got their butts kicked. Hurricanes beat them in 5 and put great physical force on New Jersey to the point where the Devils were basically hit left and right anytime they entered neutral ice. So that's my thing, which is the Devils need to find ways to win these close-knit battles because that's going to be crucial come playoff time because I don't think you're going to score 3 or more goals 4 times out of 7 in the playoffs, especially if a team has ample time to study your game plan. That's my thing. The Devils have a lot of work to do, and they have to make a few changes if they really want to be legitimate title contenders. I still believe they're a playoff team, but a Stanley Cup team, that's where I'm puzzled at. I just don't think they're ready, similar to what I said a couple years ago. Take that however you want to take that, but I just ask you to respect my opinion. All right. Leave your thoughts down below. What should the Devils do? What are your main concerns? And do you think the Devils can still make the playoffs? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X page app at TreyMatt4 or the show's X page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's what I'm going to have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening once again.